let's talk a little bit about what you can expect as you go down further into this Ultra EFT rabbit hole. This is just a foundations course to expose you to the ideas that are behind all of this tapping that I do with the Ultra. What happens is your understanding of it deepens via insight, and an insight can't be caused by another person or a situation. An insight is just a personal thing that happens. You might have a whole bunch of insights. You might not have an insight right away. Sometimes insights are tiny, little minute insights, just that little aha, oh, I saw something different. And sometimes they're so massive that an entire cluster of a kind of way of thinking falls away because you see it really differently and you can never go back and see it the same way. You just simply see it differently. As though if you had been afraid of seeing a magic trick where a woman gets sawed in half and someone shows you how the trick works. And you can never see it the same way. How can it scare you anymore when you see how it works? So that's what happens with the understanding behind the three principles of greater mind, consciousness, and thought, and how that creates our experience from the inside out. The more we begin to see this, the less we get caught up in seeing fearful things and scary things, because we can start to recognize that we're simply seeing what is, and we're having a bunch of thought and we're feeling all that thought about it. It's pretty profound, actually. I'm going to encourage you to, after you hear this course, to start keeping track of any insights that you may start to have. Sometimes they just begin to happen, even without any tapping. Simply being exposed to this understanding really begins the ball rolling for everyone to start to see things differently. So what can happen for most people is when an insight happens, or even as you begin to see the role of thought in your life, is that there's a settling down. As we experience something, and let's say you're in the middle of being upset about something, or you're feeling really sad, and it occurs to you via insight that you're feeling thought. Oh, okay. Oh, wow, I was really upset about that. I have a whole bunch of thinking about that. I am in the middle of a massive thought storm. Okay, whew. And this inner settling happens because you don't necessarily have to engage with it the same way. You don't have to believe that thinking. It's all made up anyway. You don't have to pay attention to it. You might even start to get bored with some of your circular, loopy thinking that happens. So much so that you're like, well, I don't know if I need to do this anymore. Like, it's boring. It doesn't catch your attention anymore. So it's really wonderful when you start to see that you are settled down. You recognize more quickly over time that you're having a thought storm. And one really cool thing that starts to happen is your problems, things that you called problems before, tend to take up less mental space than they had, which is amazing. And with what could you do with all that freed up mental space? What? Like, so much time and space, especially if you're a worrier or if you're anxious about the future or the past. When you can see that's a whole bunch of hazy thinking and it begins to clear, there's just so much more peace and space in which you can simply be and be present and just do and get on with your life. Another interesting thing that happens is that we're on our minds less. So before, if you're worried about this and you're thinking about how did I show up? Oh my gosh, what did I say? That self-analysis thing that happens, that being so concerned about how you showed up a certain way, or how you acted, or reviewing the past, or preparing for the future, that tends to start to fall away. And as a result, this idea of who we think we are becomes less and less important to us, and so we're less on our minds. We're just less on our own minds. And the less we're on our own minds, the more energy and awareness we have to just be here now and be taking in what is, receiving it, being in it, simply being present in our bodies or wherever we decide to turn our attention, we're not so caught up in all that thinking about ourselves. We're less self-focused. It's pretty cool what happens actually. So let's talk a little bit about who you really are and who I really am. So what we really are is that consciousness, that big blinking eyeball that all that thought goes by like on a screen. We are that consciousness. We are not the thinking. We're not those thoughts. Most of us are pretty identified with our thinking, and we've created identities around that thinking. We have ideas about who we are and what we like and what we don't like. But that's actually made up. And that's not something I'm going to go into great depth in here. That's for future courses or programs where I will dive into that a little bit more. But when you can start to see that you are the space through which all that thought passes, you're not the thought. You are that consciousness. As such, that consciousness, that limitless, edgeless energy that you are, that is pure awareness, it can't be broken. It's never been broken. It's not broken. If you think you're broken, you simply have broken thinking that like loves to flit in and out and like plays on that TV in the background that won't stop. You're broken, you're broken. It's not true. It's not true. You are the space. You are that limitless potential in every single moment. You are that space through which your thought passes. That space is inherently resilient. It's like a self-cleaning oven. There's nothing you need to do about it. You know, your body, if you cut yourself, unless you have some kind of illness that doesn't allow that, your body will just naturally heal. You don't have to go to the doctor every time you have a little scrape to sew things up. Your body does that miraculous thing. Well, what if your psyche does the same thing with emotions? So we feel like we've been damaged or hurt, that something's ripped up and torn inside. But our actual being, who we really are, has the same qualities as our body. It's that greater mind that just self-heals. It actually is naturally resilient. That is who we really are. We have innate health, and we have access to our innate wisdom in every moment. The only thing that gets in the way of it is our own thinking, when we're too focused on our thinking. But it's always there, accessible to us. And it's really, really good news, actually. And in terms of who you really are, you are whole exactly as you are. You are this awareness. You work perfectly. You are this interaction of the greater mind and your awareness and the thoughts that pass. That's you working perfectly. Even if you feel awful, that's you working perfectly. You may not like the thoughts that are going past. You may not always feel great because you may really engage with that thought storm that goes by, that tornado or hurricane that might be coming and going from time to time. But that doesn't mean that you're broken. That just means that's how you're working and that you're fine. It will pass. So you may or may not believe this. This may give you some food for thought. I'm going to encourage you to reflect on this and reflect on the possibility that there's truth in this and that you really are not broken. You are consciousness. And that is a really wonderful starting point in terms of seeing problems differently.